Hello, everyone, and welcome to Satsang. Yes, I'm in a different place. I am down in Arizona, where it is extremely hot, and I'm visiting my youngest son, and I'm going to be here for a few days. And so I am sitting in his office. He works at home, and um, so I am here enjoying, not enjoying, and short sleeve shirts, as you can tell. I even have a colored shirt on. And I'm wearing shorts, which I never do. We don't need to do that in Seattle. So, but when it's when I think Europeans and Canadians, it was like 46 yesterday, and it's on its way up now. So, at any rate, um, hello everyone, and welcome to Satsang. As I was putting it together today, wondering what I should talk about, or even if maybe just open it up for questions. It just came to me to take a moment and just uh, there's a lot of talk, especially in non-duality, about the self and what is the self. And Nisargadatta used the term all the time. Ramana did. All the sages did. What is it that we're talking about? Well, I think the first thing to do is to distinguish it that that the self is well, it is not the ego, but it is you. It's not something that's abstract. When we say the word, I say the word the self. The very fact that it's a word and we talk about it, um, the mind abstracts it. It wants to make it into something objectives that it can look at. Oh, the self, yeah. Oh, it's round and it's it's light blue, and that kind of misses the whole point because what we're talking about is yourself. It's got to become personal like that, not become a person, but become personal. That is, your experience of it is very personal because it's the experience of yourself without any concepts attached to it. And that really is all there is to it. The fact is that you are the self. And that's self-evident, isn't it? You exist. So when you say I, you're referring to yourself. The question isn't whether you are or not. The question is how we think about ourselves as opposed to how we really are. The way we think about ourselves is what we call the egoic mind. And when it is examined closely and carefully, we find there's nothing there. It's just a thought. Now, what is there? There's this functioning going on that we all experience, life and growth and the functioning of the human body and the natural world and the activity of human beings. There's all sorts of activity going on. Specifically, for an individual, we're most familiar with the activity of our own bodies and the thought patterns that we call our own minds. And we project onto that a sense of self. Imagine like a robot that is so lifelike, that has so many of the human qualities that we really can't tell whether it is or not. How would we possibly know? We would inevitably project a sense of self on it. Matter of fact, I just read recently about some guy who works for Google on some AI project they're doing. Um, he claims that this one thing they made is sentient. Matter of fact, he started a little movement. He's he's contacted senators and stuff to get rights for this. There's this deep belief that somehow, if we just put the materials together in the right way, we're going to get consciousness, which is the underlying assumption that consciousness is a result of is an emergent property of matter. So It's not. We have to recognize that the only experience you have of the self is yourself. The truth of the matter is, you don't even know if I exist. Not really, right? We have a sensory experience, right? And then from that sensory experience, we try to extrapolate what it is we're experiencing. So we look around at a world, and the model we have of the world is the materialistic model, or the physical reality model, which means that there's something out there, and its nature is these various material structures. Now, there's no doubt that you are aware and that you are experiencing. There's no doubt of that. The question is, what are we experiencing? And in all of this, where do I find myself? How do I rightly identify myself? This isn't just a theological or a philosophical notion, because if you look through your life and more of the modern understanding we have of things, how I see myself is how I experience the world. I never experience what we call the world as it is. I always experience my perceptions of them. And my perceptions of them are driven completely by this central idea of who I regard myself to be, which is why non dual self inquiry is constantly coming back to that question, well, who are you, the ultimate perceiver? And any definition I have of myself that comes to me as a result of some concept or some idea or some explanation of the world has to be dubious. It has to be questioned because it's always secondhand. Where do you find firsthand information? Right here with your own sense of being. It is direct, it is simple, it is uncomplicated, it is non-conceptual. Everybody here right now is having the direct experience of existence. Are you not? If I say, do you exist? You don't hesitate to answer. And what non-dual inquiry does is it focuses attention there, just that sense of being and nothing else. Because everything else is a concept about it, right? Now, is that sense of being enough? This is the question, right? Because okay, that's great, but I got to make a living, and I need some friends, and all the other stuff that we talk about that is part of life, right? I'm not disregarding any of that, but none of that can answer the question of who am I. And so there is this sense of your own existence. What if that is it? It doesn't take away from anything else, but what if that simple sense of your own existence is the self? Thank you. My son brought me a latte. I don't have my sippy thing with me today, and you guys wouldn't recognize me if I didn't have something in my hand to drink. Is that See, the problem arises is that we get to that sense of being, and then the mind says, okay, now what? Because our minds are forever looking for something. They're looking for some concrete, objective thing that can be looked at, because that's all our minds can do, right? We're always describing one thing in terms of another. That's what all there is to thinking. I'm looking at an object and I'm describing its attributes and its characteristics and what makes it up and the like. I can't do that with me. I can't step outside and look back at me. My experience is completely subjective, it's completely here. And so, how then do I know myself? Or in the context of this conversation, what if that sense of being was all there was to know? Or at least that would be the starting point, wouldn't it? Starting from what I do know. And what is the most fundamental, primitive, essential thing there is to know? That I am. I am. Now that's significant, right? Because that is a knowledge that is non-conceptual. Look back, and without consulting memory and history and things that you've heard and things that you've been told, see if you can find a beginning to that. Or is it just something that's always been here? Can you find any kind of attribute to it other than beingness? Does it have a color, a weight, or a gender, a belief system? Does it have a religion? All of those things are conceptual. All of those things come and go. And none of those things could come and go if you weren't here first. So prior to any kind of mentation, the I am must be there. Did it have a beginning? Does it have any attributes other than existence? Now, I'm not going to be able to convince you that that is so deeply significant that you should spend some time with it. But I'm going to suggest that you try. But just sitting quietly with putting your attention on that impossible to describe sense of your own existence. When you try to do that, you'll notice how the mind wants to distract you, wants to look away, because from the point of view of the mind and our subject object, there's nothing there. People will say, there's nothing and nothing exists, right? Which is really a kind of a superficial way of looking at non-duality. Something does exist, but it's indefinable. But, and here's the kicker, the more you put your attention there, the more you begin to discover that that sense of your being is you. There's not a sense of being and a you really looking at it, right? Because then even that would be something other than you. And it comes to this place that if you spend enough time there and go through the discipline of bringing your attention away from the mind and its habit energy of attempting to create objects, you will find that there's more there than you thought. And that, I don't mean more in quantity, but any place you put your attention long enough will expand. It'll take over more and more of your attention. If you've ever concentrated on anything to the point where you forgot to eat, right? Or that you just things are happening around you and you don't even hear them. You're so focused on something. What you focus on expands, it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So if your attention is going really as far as attention can go, and then it becomes this kind of this inward contemplation and inward pondering, you're really stretching the inner eye as far as it can possibly go. And what happens is that you find a vastness. It's like endless. And at the same time, it is not bound by space or time. It is not endless in the sense of that It's a lot of space. It's infinite space. It's something completely different. And it's you. It's the real you. It's the you that's there before any concept happened. It's the you that was there before the world existed. Before the world was, I am. The way Christ put it. Let me check my settings here and make sure the volume is loud enough. I'm going to actually do it manually. Pull it up a bit. Sometimes it fluctuates when I have it on automatically adjusting. But at any rate, welcome once again to everyone. Very good to be here with you. Roberto's having 40-degree weather. It was that at like 7 o'clock this morning here. Well, it is the desert. What can you say? People don't go out much in the summer here. So hello to everyone. Roberto, you say it's like I see a car coming and crashing me, knowing I should move. I do not, because are you talking about the heat or something else? I've never, honestly. Yeah. Are you talking about life in general? A little clarification before I go off on that. Joanna, hello from Finland. Do you have any advice on how to detach from things? I'm moving out of my hometown next month, and I'm feeling overwhelming attachment and fear even. Thank you so much. Well, first off, let yourself off the hook. There's this, spiritual and personal development, the attachment and letting go of things can become like a technique, right? And then a burden, right? Oh, I've got to let go. I got to let go of the attachment. That's not how you do it. Because really what that means is I'm going to stop being attached. And you don't need to do that. Recognize that that sense of feeling attached is totally normal, right? You've lived there, right? Hometown, so you've lived there a long time or maybe your whole life, right? Which means everything about it is familiar, right? You probably know every street, every corner, every shop that came in and is already and gone out of business, right? You notice everything new. You know every inch of it. Now, when our nervous system knows things in familiarity like that, it feels very safe. It knows what to expect. This is like why we like things like that. We like putting down roots in a place, right? We feel very, very safe. That is a natural attachment. It's a natural bonding that takes place. And you're part of it, and you contribute to that. You're just part of the whole atmosphere. And so when one has to leave a place like that, it is of course going to feel fear, right? Why? Well, it's afraid of what it doesn't know. And I say it because I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the nervous system. If you go back to that sense of being that I was talking about earlier, and just let yourself stay there, and from there, look at that sense of what the mind has called attachment, right? So when the mind says it's attachment, and you have some kind of spiritual background, you're going to say, oh, attachment, bad, right? So throw out the word attachment and just get down to the actual experience itself. No conceptualization. There's its experience that is running through your body and your nervous system. That it's comfortable where it is and doesn't want to go somewhere else. And of course, this is the way it was built, right? It was built to resist change because I know I can keep you safe here. I don't know if I can stay safe over there. So I don't care if it looks better, right? But because I can't take the chance. It is the nervous system is very fundamentalist, right? And no, this is the way it's going to be. Don't you dare rock my boat, right? Now, you can now, if you just stand back into the place of the witness of that, it ceases to be a problem for you. It's just what's happening. This is the way nature works. And so you just kind of very gently say, I totally understand. I totally get it. Yeah. Yes, but I am leaving this town. Right? And it's okay to grieve it. It's okay for it to hurt. It's okay to start missing things, right? Even to have second thoughts, right? About, well, maybe I should just stay. But no, it's time to go. And you have to recognize that the nervous system, the whole design of life is to stabilize itself, right? To stabilize itself in a universe that is completely unstable. The fact that life exists at all is just a total freaking miracle, right? That this kind of stability, right, and gradual change has emerged. It's just absolutely amazing. And part of the reason life can be is this dance between growth and expansion and freedom and conformity, staying where we are, and safety. This creative tension between the two, keep scraping up against something, this creative tension between the two makes life possible. Now, just take a step back to that sense of being, recognizing that everything is impermanent. Some things come and go very quickly, like thoughts. Some things come and go over a much longer period of time, like our hometown. But everything does, except for one thing. The one who's witnessing the coming and going is not coming and going. And from there, you find that there's nothing but compassion for the energy system. And you're going to lovingly guide it into the next phase of life. And that means simply you're being resolute about the change you're going to make and acknowledging the natural resistance to it. That's what it really means to be detached. Right? It means you're allowing it to be there because this is the nature of life. And so but at the same time, it is also the nature of life to expand and grow. So you are allowing both sides to be there, both the desire for freedom and the need for safety. And you don't take sides. You don't fight with either side. You sit in the middle as the enlightened witness or the peacemaker and saying, well, yeah, I know. It's hard to let this go. Wonderful memories, wonderful feelings. It's very comfortable. We're used to it here. But it's time to go. It's okay. We're going to be okay. And with that kind of inner leadership, you might call it, that the whole energy system will follow you. If you're not fighting with it, it'll trust you and it will follow you. It's like you're training the dog, because that's what this is. The human nervous system is just it's the animal nature. It is what allows us to have a life at all. Right? And on that level, we are no different than dogs or rats or cockroaches or blades of grass. Right? On that level, the only difference is self-awareness. Is for some reason in this form, self-awareness has emerged. It required this form in order for self-awareness to make its place in the scene of life. And this sense of self-awareness is the ultimate guide. This all represents, the upper chakras, and the animal nature represents the lower ones. Or they represent it. I mean, they're actually a model of that. And so we're not abandoning them. I'm going to leave my body now because you're not going to. You are taking up the enlightened leadership, which before would have been just instinctual, like an animal would be. And in the undeveloped human being, that leadership is being done by the ego, which is the imaginary sense of self that is purely conceptual. Okay? And the awakening is simply awakening to that which is not the animal nature and is not the egoic nature, right? But is something else completely. But acts through those energetic patterns as it gets further and further close to self-realization, which is to recognizing itself as the very source of all of this. So just be really kind to yourself, be kind to what you're feeling, acknowledging it's perfectly natural. And of course, there's going to be a feeling of attachment because you loved it. There was love. There's wonderful memories and all sorts of great things there. But everything has to pass. And now it's time for this to pass. And you're going to move somewhere else completely different. And a new life is going to happen. A new hometown is going to emerge. And you'll put down some other roots. Or you may just wander for a while, like I have, and be your own roots. So does that help, Johanna? Let's scroll down to the bottom, which pronounced Joanna. Got used to pronouncing it Johanna because that's the way they did it in Argentina. Let's see. Yeah, okay, I think in response to that. Right, yep, so very good. Hopefully that helps you. Roberto, let me see if you did a little bit more. Gave me a little more info down there at the bottom. Hold on, yes. For that. No, so I guess it was just about the heat. I get out of the car. It's like 115, which is like 46, 47 for you guys in use Celsius. For a moment, it feels like, when you go into a spa or a sauna, it feels really good. And that lasts about 10 seconds. And then it is just, there's no relief. There's no relief. And so at 9 o'clock this morning, I was in, as a pool, I was in the swimming pool, just kind of floating around. Amazing. All the times to pick to come down here, but I hadn't seen him for a while. So. And my grandson, my marriage is 15 now. He's got his driver's permit. It's like, what? This is just too weird. Anyway, hello to you, Crispin, Robbie in Romania, Crispin in Switzerland, John in Scotland. God, this is so amazing, isn't it? It's just amazing. Ava in Poland, I could almost get emotional about it. It's just extraordinary. We can form a tribe like this all over the world. The internet was invented for satsang. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Crispin, my mother passed away this week. Since she had a hard, abusive side, I'm almost unable to mourn. How can I grieve? After all, she was my mother, and I don't want to push aside down in the unconscious. I don't think you are. I know you well enough. Just be present with it and just see what comes up. I didn't grieve my mother. I mean, how could I? She was abusive from the get-go. And I came to understand her, right? And that she was not well. But there was no closeness. Matter of fact, her death was like, well, I hope it was better for you the next time around. Because obviously, people don't get like that unless something horrible has happened to them in their youth. And some evidence has come out about sexual abuse and the like, which was, my mother was born in 1911. It was very common. It was not, and it was completely covered up. And I mean, it was way, way more common. But it was never. It wasn't exposed like it is now. My sister and I, at her funeral, everybody was kind of, well, my brother's very fundamentalist. They're Christian. Their whole church and everything did the service, and they were kind of appalled at us. Finally, I shed one tear, basically. As when it's just the immediate family before they close the casket. And I just kind of put my hand on her shoulder and wished her the best. And then I had the extraordinary experience of about 20 years later meeting her as a 2-year-old girl with very loving parents. So I had no real grief about it. So don't be concerned. It's not like I'm not grieving, I'm pushing it into the unconscious. No, that's not the case. What are you feeling about it, right? Just feel into it and see what feelings are there. If there's anger, if there's any kind of sadness, if there's pity, right? And just see what's there and let it be there. You don't have to grieve if when there was never really that kind of a bond. With my mother, it was just fear, distance, tension, walk on eggshells. How could I miss that, right? And it ended up just feeling just enormous amount of sadness for her, right? But I didn't miss her. I mean, when I left Chicago about 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago. Yeah. Was it 1980? Yeah. It was right around there. 40 years ago. I went back to Chicago a couple of times. I saw him maybe once or twice. So it's okay. It's okay. Don't assume you're pushing it into the unconscious. If there's an openness to feeling whatever you're feeling, then you're not pushing it. You're not suppressing it. Right? And if you find yourself at some point just feeling some kind of a sympathy or something like that, just be with it when it happens. And it doesn't have to be any great mourning. And you're not alone in that. I know a lot of people whose when their parents died, it was just like, oh, thank God. And I just hope she had a better life. And then I got confirmation that she did in a very, very interesting and really beautiful way. I'm not talking to spirits or anything like that. It was a 2-year-old girl. So anyway, so yeah, just kind of take the pressure off. You're fine. You're fine. If I sensed that you were suppressing something, I'd tell you. Anja, good to see you. Neutrality. Hello, GP. I've asked a question in the previous video about awareness being nothing and everything. Can you please elaborate on that? Yeah, I saw that, and I haven't. And I'm glad you brought it up here because it's a little bit more than I could put it like in a YouTube comment. The nature of non-duality, that is not two-ness, it is inherently mysterious, right? When we say nothing, our minds think of nothing as nothing, as absolutely nothing, right? Well, nothing can't possibly exist because it's a negation, right? It derives itself as a suppositional opposite of something, right? It can't possibly exist because there's at least a concept of nothing, right? And so when we're talking about the self and pure emptiness, to the mind, that's nothing, right? But what it is actually is not a thing. It is being itself, existence itself, right? Without any kind of attributes other than its own existence. And that's the nothingness, right? Then the everythingness is that the nature of this essence, right, is everything that can possibly be would be included in the essence of being itself. So beingness manifests itself as everything that can possibly exist, right? And the thing that exists gives evidence of being. Right? Without the evidence, the being is, but is unknown even to itself. Right? It's the self-knowing of emptiness, which the mind would call nothingness, which is not nothing at all. It is simply one without a second, one with nothing to compare it to, with no boundaries, with no shape, with no characteristics defining it. It, therefore, is the source of all characteristics and defines all things. The essential quality of absolutely everything is its existence. It starts there, right? Before I can describe a glass of water, it has to exist, right? And so when we see this existence as the self, then I can say that the self is this, and the self is everything. Because the nature of the self is pure being. And the nature of everything that exists is some aspect of being. It is, white light, pure white light cannot be seen, can it? It appears to not exist. And thank God, because if you could see it, you couldn't see anything else, right? I couldn't see this computer screen. And you couldn't see the computer screen, because if pure white light was visible, we wouldn't see anything past here, right? So the pure white light is invisible. But when you take it and run it through a prism, suddenly all different aspects of it, this infinite range of color emerges. Each one of those colors is light. It is simply a particular aspect of light. You could speak of it in terms of vibration and things like that. So that's, but you could say light in and of itself, right, as far as our experience of it, is nothing. Is absolutely nothing, because it's unknowable. Its nature does not get revealed until it gets broken into pieces. And the self is like that. It gets broken into pieces without breaking into pieces. You can't break space into pieces, and space can contain anything. And the latest thinking, the deepest thinking about the nature of all matter is that it is nothing but space itself condensed. Very difficult for us to imagine, but basically nothing condensing into something, which means it's not nothing, right? It is not a thing. It is not an object that can be conceived. It is nothing we can make a model even of, right? But you don't have to, because you're it, right? Because everything is that. You are the self-awareness of being. You are being aware of itself. So when you're talking about that, you can see that to accurately express it, you have to say it is beyond all opposites. So you can't call it nothing and you can't call it everything. It's neither this nor that nor both nor neither, right? It is beyond the four possibilities. It is simply itself and nothing else, right? But the nature of it is the expression of itself in an infinite number of forms. And there is absolutely no limit to the form that it can, for lack of a better word, take or make manifest. If think of it as space condensing. Right? I'll also refer to it as self-modulating consciousness. I've used this metaphor before, but light, we don't see objects. We see the light reflecting off the objects, and in our minds we conceptualize an object out there, and through the other senses we put together a model in the nervous system and in the brain and the mind of where we are and navigate that territory. But the fact of the matter is we never see, feel, touch any of it. And light is a very clear example of that. The light, you never see anything over here, you see it here, because the light's hitting here. And because part of the light is being absorbed and part is being reflected, I see color. And I say, oh, look, that picture is green, right? The sky is blue. But it's actually not. It's just the characteristics. Everything is being seen right here. Now, what if light had the capacity to modulate itself, that it could itself hold back certain frequencies and let others go, right? And project, radiate out. So it could radiate out red and hold on to the rest. Right? You would see, and it could do that in such a way, you would literally see objects and there weren't any objects there, right? Because it would just be the self-modulation of light. And what if there was some very weird and mysterious substance that could do that for all your sensual experience, for sight, for touch, for hearing, for sound, for taste, for smell? Well, there is consciousness, and that's exactly what it is, a self-modulating substance. We have mistaken that and think we're experiencing an actual world out there, and there isn't one there. It is completely self-modulating consciousness. So you can see that everything is that. And so the thing both exists and does not exist, right? It does not exist as an actual external objective entity in and of itself that possesses those qualities. It only exists as a modulation, a temporary modulation of consciousness, giving rise to a form that is experienced in all of these different ways. So the thing is both something and nothing. And consciousness itself is not any of those and is all of those at the same time. Are you following? It's very subtle and it's quite mysterious. Right? But so you can see that nothing exists and everything exists, right? Nothing exists in and of itself, but it does exist as consciousness. And so it is both all and nothing at the same time. And as mysterious and out there as it seems, that in fact is reality. Just chuckle over it. Just like, wow. Wow. And you are that. You are that consciousness. The body that you're enjoying, right? All the experiences, happiness and grief, the whole range is all that. And it's all you. You're at the center of it. You are the conscious awareness. Getting to the place from which you're looking where you can't see yourself, that's the nothing. That's the nothing that's also empty, that's also everything. That is the nothing. It's you. Okay. Thank you, neutrality. Thank you. You're making me giggle. Jerry's, hello. Hello, sir. And the sweltering Ireland. Yeah, you guys are like getting it now. God, it's so weird. Yeah. Oh, climate change is an illusion. It's a hoax. Don't think so. Dave Lane, hello to you. There comes all of the support for you, Crispin. Oh, neutrality, you continued. How can everything be nothing when everything is basically just the sum of some things? Yes. But every one of those sums, you keep going down and down and down, right? I'll just add this because science. Everything is the result of the sum of something else, right? It's an aggregation, right? So you take this apart and you find little things, but you keep going, right? Or take those apart and take those apart. There's got to be something there, right? There's got to be something that isn't an aggregation of something else. It isn't an infinite regression. Right? That something is the self. That is consciousness. And you can see that that which can give rise to everything can itself not be a particular thing. Because if it is, there's a limit on what can arise from it. It has a definition. And means there's something other than that. Right? Which is of course the materialistic view. So did I answer it for you? Did I cover it, or do I need to go into it a little bit more? Because I didn't notice the second half of your question. So thank you. Hello, Lisa. Deo, good afternoon. Also, world's on fire apparently. Yeah. Let's keep pumping that oil out of the ground. Oh my God. When will we learn? I keep doing my part. Carl Lucy. Hi, GP. I've had a realization that my life up until now has had very little to do with the I am. How do I make decisions from the real me? Can we converse with the I am? Is that intuition? And would I not just be talking to myself anyway? Thank you. Green hearts. Okay. You are the I am. Yes, you'd be talking to yourself anyway. But, boy, how do I approach this? First off, the false me, right? You're talking about the real me, which, there's kind of an assumption of, there's a false me. You said, I've had little to do with the I am. That I, it's had little to do with the I am. What is that? Let's slow down and look at that. Let's zoom in on that for a second, right? Because it's just loaded with assumptions, right? I have had very little to do with the I am. Right? What is that I? Now, if I was sitting with you right now and I could talk to you about it, I could query you about it. We can't do this through this particular medium. So I'm just going to kind of have to jump on, I think, the best way to put it in a form like this. That sense of I is what is called the ego, the false sense of self. It's a sense of self. Right? But yet it uses the word I. Right? Now, if I get on my phone and I ask Siri a question, and I say, Siri, what's 2 + 2 = And she says, I'm sorry, I don't know. Now there's no I there, is there? There's just the word I, but there's no actual sentience behind it. Now, you are sentient. You do exist. You do know that you are, and you are aware of that. The word I, the thought I, appears in the mind as a sound, and the actual sentient real you takes that I as itself. So this I says, I'm unhappy, I'm bored, I'm scared, I'm lonely, I'm not enough. And the real you, the true I am, the sentience, takes that on and gives it life. Because it doesn't have any life, does it? Siri has no life, right? And I think she doesn't get to go on dates. What I mean is, there's nobody there. There's no life in it. It is a pure simulation, right? The I in the mind is a simulation. That is the false sense of self. Now, because it's just a simulation, it's just a thought, there isn't an entity there, right? Which means it never made a decision, right? The one making decisions has to be a sentient being. So it is the I am that has been the witness to the process of thinking we call decision making. Nobody's made a decision. Deciding thoughts have simply emerged. Go back to the time when you made any decision and look at the moment right before it. You may have been struggling on it over or something like that, but when the decision happened, it just happened. You didn't really make it. A decision happened, and then 2 or 3 thoughts later, Siri spoke up again and said, I decided that. I chose that. But that I chose it was always after the choice had been made. And so it assumed that it made that because of our belief that this I is an actual entity. So you aren't really conversing with the I am. You are the I am. Now, the I am isn't making decisions because the I am isn't a person. It is pure presence. It is beingness. And the decision making is just part of the process that is being witnessed by the I am. Now, when the sense of I is liberated from the thought I and begins to move back towards the real I am, which is simply the witness, that process of coming back, bringing the I back home, or as Christ put it, I go into my Father, right? The truth. What happens is the entire process of decision making changes. It's not that you make better decisions. It's just the I, the false I, is no longer governing the show. Right? The true I is. And not governing it like a person governing it. It's still a spontaneous process, but it is no longer being constrained by the sense of the egoic mind. And the only thing that gives the egoic mind any teeth, any presence, any authority is the fact that you believe it. That's it. Because you do have authority. You are real. You are present. You do exist. You are the being. And you project your beingness or your selfness onto that which is nothing but the self-modulation of yourself. Did I explain that okay? So you never made a decision, buddy. Now that could either be good news or bad news. It means that you can take no responsibility for anything. You can take no blame. You're free. And of course, for a lot of people, that's curious. Well, that means I'm going to do horrible things. No, the ego does horrible things, not the self. What does the self have to do anything horrible? The self is not selfish. Why should it be? It's infinite. What's there to be selfish about? So you have always been the self. You were never that I. That I was always an empty-headed thought. That which isn't an empty-headed thought, which is real, simply mistook for yourself. And so whatever was thought about this I, you took on as yourself. But the thoughts about that I were in fact all arbitrary. That's conditioning. It's just however the processes of thought happen to evolve and get formed within the particular environment that you grew up in and the experiences you had and blah, blah, blah. All of that just was the interaction between the organism and the environment, and it came up with certain kinds of conditioning. And all of that's fine, right? That's what it does. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But when the sense of self, the real you, identifies with that, it takes on that whole thing as if it is you. And now you feel confined in this little bitty world of the egoic mind. And we're just feeling, oh my God, it's not me. It never was me. What I considered to be a bad decision was simply conditioning and not consciousness. If conditioning is making the quote unquote decision, then it's always going to be following conditioning. That's all it could ever be. But when I'm no longer identified with the conditioning, the entire process changes. The world changes, right? Right in front of my eyes. Right? I see things as they are. I step into my true place, my true authority. I mean, of course, I'm always in that place, but I actually realize it and claim it for myself. So, how's that, Carl? Hello, Jennifer. Baba GP, much love to you. Ah, Baba, I like that name. My granddaughter started calling me that when she couldn't say it much. Baba came out, and I've been Baba ever since. She, of course, had no idea that it's actually a beautiful word in Sanskrit for father or elder or someone of respect. Anyway, thank you. Dale, if I want to keep my own suffering, help my own suffering, I could keep. If I want to help my own suffering, I try to think how I advise someone else to get through the situation. That's how we should help ourselves, since we are not the sufferer, but only observing it. Yeah, actually, in that, as a technique, what's happening is you're stepping out of it. It's a way in which you can kind of depersonalize it, kind of step back and look at uh, the false self as kind of a, like, it's more of a friend. I mean, it's the, with the egoic mind, we want to turn it into this enemy and kill the ego, and that sort of thing, which really makes an inner conflict that's completely and totally unnecessary. But it's quite real. And when I teach inner reconciliation, that's exactly what I do. I step into this other place, and I talk to the whole nervous system as if it were an entity. Right now, it isn't. Right. But it can feel that way, right? Because we have so disconnected and alienated ourselves. We've so suppressed aspects of ourselves that they operate, from our perception, they seem to be entities operating against us. I mean, they're not, right? They're you, but they're suppressed aspects of you. So to sit back and regard them as like you would a friend that's asked you for advice. First off, the very act of doing that creates a different relationship with it. It's not a problem anymore, right? It's not something you have to get rid of, you know? Because if a friend came and asked you for advice, or an friend came and just was grousing and didn't even ask for advice, was just upset about something, you wouldn't say, "Get out of here! I can't stand you. Go read a book. Go take a seminar." Go watch Satsang. You wouldn't do that. You'd be with your friend. You'd hang out with them. You'd help them come back and begin to open some doors for them, some possibilities. And it's exactly the same kind of relationship. The very act of doing that puts you in the position that I call the peacemaker. And if you really understand that what you're dealing with is really a set of conditioned functions that appears to be an entity, a problematic entity working against you, and you can regard it compassionately, it senses that sense of safety and begins to become more malleable. Right? It becomes less tense. The defenses start to come down, and eventually, it just very naturally begins to integrate back into you. And those very things that were difficulties now become strengths. The defenses become the defensive energy of defense becomes the energy of self-expression. It's kind of an integration. It's a merging. A soul fragmentation is being gathered back together into wholeness, because they were fragmented simply because we didn't have permission to be who you were. You were not accepted as you really were, as you really are. And so, we get fragmented. That's what's happening. And so when you're with yourself like that, right? And it's okay to say that you're with yourself, right? You're kind of loving aspects of yourself back into wholeness. You're taking them out of the basement, removing the stigma, that negative emotion, got to get rid of that. And it's just an emotion. It's just feelings running through you that are you. And that somehow we have created an antagonistic relationship towards them. And so just kind of, well, what do you need? If you recognize that all of it is there, every conflict, every internal, every bit of resistance, every part of you, every bit of self-sabotage, everything negative self-talk is all just the ineffective, the strategy the nervous system came up with to try to keep you safe. You'll have a different perspective of it. That's all it's trying to do. And if you stop fighting it, you'll immediately make it feel more safe, which means it now becomes malleable. It becomes, you can work with it, right? And you can eventually, it'll eventually become your loving servant, like a good dog. So, thank you, Dale. Hopefully, I gave you enough meat for you to be with that. Wow, an hour already? Jeez. That's why I always ask them to make it extra, extra hot, like 190 degrees. I think, how's anybody drinking like that? So I want it to last. I like to sip on it gradually. And well, enough of my drinking background story. Robbie, what is grace? On the outside, it seems to make things fall into place, at least when we like how things are going. But what other description can we have rather than a benevolent phenomenon? Singular. Well, grace is simply the truth appearing. The fact that you are the self, you are the truth, you are reality, inevitably has to appear as the fact in your life. No matter what else you've believed about yourself, those are just beliefs and no belief can last. But the truth isn't a belief, and so it is self-sustained. It can't come and go. It's not true one place and not in another. It's not true in one time and not in another. It is absolutely changeless, which means it's timeless and dimensionless. That's the characteristic of the self. That experienced in our life as the influence of waking us from the dream of being a person, of life in matter, of being a finite mortal being. The truth is waking us up from that. We don't wake ourselves up. We're in the middle of it, right? And the fact that it is truth, and it isn't a conceptual truth like mathematics or something like that, that it is a living truth. It is there even when all the falsity and false beliefs are there. And its presence, because it is truth, is forever influencing, forever calling you. And when we recognize it, we call it grace. But it's the truth. It's simply the truth of your own being. So in a sense, it's simply another word for the self, or reality. Now, that appearing, well, ultimately you see it as benevolent because it's leading you back to the you really are, which is magnificent beyond imagination. Its methods don't always seem benevolent. It did not take a vow of nonviolence to, it'll whack you upside the head with the cosmic 2x4. It's more than willing to do that because it's got to break the shell, and sometimes it's a thick shell of the egoic mind, as you see with some people. We know people, many of them are leading countries, a thick, almost impenetrable cloud of darkness, right? That somehow has to be pierced by this light of truth. So when it appears, sometimes it appears as just the right person at the right time, or the right book at the right time, and you can easily recognize it. But when you run into something and you thought it was going to go one way and it just goes completely south on you, that also is grace. But sometimes the detour. You've all had the experience of, you come up and there's workmen, right? Got to take a detour, right? God, I'm going to be late, right? And then you discover something of absolute wonder on the detour. That job you hate, and then you find the love of your life, right? I mean, we've all had that experience. So while it may appear to be adversity, it never is. As Ram Dass referred to it as fierce grace. I think Mooji would refer to it as the white flame, right? It burns everything that isn't you, and we need that. We sometimes need that. The more we surrender, the more we do the inner inquiry, we become more humble, we become more open, we become more compassionate, we become more understanding, the more pliable we become, and the less of the more draconian methods are necessary. Right? Because you're already willing to surrender. Right? You're willingly taking up the cross, in which case it's not a cross anymore. You're willing to do it. I'm willing to have this. George Harrison, very fascinating character, of all the Beatles and their whole spiritual excursion to Indian life. He's the only one that really stuck with it. I mean, it really impacted him, that it became a way of life. And he made the comment after he had become ill, and it was obvious that the ill was going to be terminal. That he had said early on in his spiritual education, that he says, well, if I have to go through a whole bunch of things to burn up the karma, well, bring it on, bring it all on now. I don't want to wait. I don't want to. Don't piecemeal it. Just dump it on me. So I mean, it was just this beautiful soul that was just willing to enter into the whatever it would take for him to break that spell and open the door to his awakening. Like, just beautifully humble man, uncharacteristic for somebody who had that level of fame and adulation. Just a very, very humble man. Anyway, you can see the point. There was he completely surrendered to it, and I saw a few interviews with him, and people had visited him late in his life, and he was full of grace. He was full of grace, full of humor and wit, and even though he was just completely falling apart and physically having a lot of suffering, there was just this glow that from that surrender. And so the more we surrender, the less the things that somebody else would think this is a horrible adversity, you're just going to, what? No, it's not. Because there's nothing in there to resist it, to create suffering. We're simply surrendering. And that can seem like such a scary word. I've got to give up my life and renounce the world. No, it's nothing like that. You only have to let go of whatever isn't you. It was not you in the first place. That's all you have to do. You don't have to renounce the world. Don't leave your family and become a mendicant, wandering in the Himalayas. You don't have to do any of that. You can do that right here. They represent states of mind. You're simply letting go of your dependency on the world, and you're allowing grace to move within your life with authority, and you surrender to it, realizing you're surrendering to the truth of your own being, and ultimately you are surrendering to yourself. So hopefully that's a good enough definition for grace for you all, a workable one, and not just a theological one. Hello, Peter in Italy. Much love to you. Oh, more love for Crispin. Send love to Crispin. You can feel it, Crispin. David Eager. Hi, GP. I am dealing with guilt over anger. My religious indoctrination was to forgive and forget in order to be forgiven myself. It then makes me feel like I'm the bad guy for setting boundaries. Oh my God. Yes. Probably Christian. Yeah, probably Christian. And unfortunately, Christianity these days has nothing to do with Christ. Very, very unfortunate. Okay, first take a nice step back and recognize that both the feeling of anger and the feeling of guilt are feelings running through your nervous system, and that you are aware of them. Let's start with that. And they were taught to you. They arise, and they come and go. But you don't. This is very significant to get. You are the witness of them. And so guilt and anger are feelings. Now they're strong feelings. Right? And because of your particular indoctrination, it set up a relationship between you and anger that you were not supposed to feel it, right? With a heavy threat over your head. You had to forgive or you wouldn't be forgiven, right? Which isn't really forgiveness at all. That's a deal. That's brokering a deal. All right, I forgive. How can I convince God that I've actually forgiven? I don't know. How can I act? Right? You can see the whole thing is fraudulent. The whole thing just sets you up to fail, which is, of course, exactly what the point was. You're supposed to feel guilty, right? Because then the one who hands out the indulgences has all the power. So you can see the entire thing was created, right, within the nervous system. Now, first thing you can do is recognize that I'm not that. There's a feeling of guilt, right? And because I was so identified with it, I would say I am guilty. I'm feeling this guilt, and this guilt is a problem that I have to get rid of. I shouldn't feel anger, right? Now take that I out. Anger is a natural phenomenon, right? When we are under threat of some kind, right? And that threat could be a moral offense or it could be a physical offense, right? We either run or we fight, right? The physical sensation and the state the body gets into in order to run away is called fear. We feel that in the body as fear. There's tension. You can't think straight. All you want to do is get the hell out of there, right? When the body, which it will always choose to run if it can. If it can't, it goes to the other, which is fight. It gets ready to fight. The body getting ready to fight is what we call anger. That's what it is, right? It's not a moral thing. It is very much a physiological condition. The body it's pumping all the blood to the muscles. It's taking away all the creative functions. You literally see red, right? Because you're getting ready to defend yourself. Now, it gets more murky, right? When it's like a moral offense, if somebody says something bad, it's not really a physical threat, right? Or somebody does something horrible, right? And then somebody says you can't feel anger. Well, that's not possible, all right? And this is unfortunately all of the Abrahamic religions, which dominate the world right now. They have made an enemy of nature, right? The only thing they want to keep of nature is fear, right? Because they get you to do whatever they want. Nature is fallen to the Abrahamic religions. That's the interpretation of Adam and Eve. That all of nature is fallen. That's why in medieval times, the god Pan, the god of nature, became the devil. Look at the pictures. They're the same guy. Right? So it is always a denial of my nature. Right? And so for them, forgiveness simply means pardon. You're let off the hook, right? You deserve to be punished, but you're let off the hook. And then now you have the responsibility of somehow suppressing what you cannot suppress because it is your nature. This is the whole catch-22 they got us all stuck in, right? And again, it's the condition that happens as children. We express ourselves as we are. The tribe doesn't like it, and we get smacked. And all of a sudden, it's not safe to be myself. My own nature becomes an enemy. And you can see that this is really what the story of Adam and Eve is talking about, how this happens. And there's more to it than that. But it's a mythological metaphor for our own nature being denied, right? And that's what happened, the nature of the curiosity, right? And obedience became more important than your nature. So you can't help but get angry about it. I hear politicians and like giving speeches. I know they're all full of shit. They're lying through their teeth, right? And it angers me. Of course it does. It's supposed to, right? Because anger means I need to take action, right? Now I can't fight with them or anything like that, so I have to channel that anger. But that, in that sense, anger is moral righteousness is absolutely valid. I always like to point out Gandhi did what he did. He's pictured as this. He was angry. He was pissed off. You have no right to be in our country, right? He just wasn't violent. He was smart. He knew how to channel it. He wasn't willing. He knew that he couldn't fight them at violence. They were experts at it. They've been doing it for hundreds of years and continued to do it and continue now to do it. So that anger, you've been taught there's something wrong with it, and it's not, and there isn't. Okay, well then what then is forgiveness? What does it mean to actually forgive them? Well, as I mentioned before, it's come to mean pardon, right? You were horrible. You deserve to be punished, but I'm going to let you off the hook. Aren't I wonderful? Praise me. Right? Now, interestingly enough, the word forgive, in at least what I read in both in the Greek dictionary of the Bible, that the word that Christ used didn't mean pardon. It meant to be found not guilty. It meant to be vindicated of wrongdoing. Now, isn't that interesting? And what a picture that gives of him on the cross saying, Father, find them not guilty. They don't know what they're doing. And to me, that sums the whole thing up. Right? If I know that the person who is offending me, the person who I'm angry at, right, is simply operating out of the blindness of their conditioning. There is no awareness there. They are little more than an animal, right? As a matter of fact, they're less than an animal. An animal with an ego, right? Which is all it is. They're not yet human, right? They've not yet actually tasted humanity, right? Because their hearts are closed. Right? Now, if I recognize that, I recognize that they can't help what they're doing. They can't help it, right? Because the light hasn't dawned on them. Now, I have found them innocent. I'm not found them not responsible. They are responsible. Everybody has to take the consequences of their actions, even when we're ignorant, even when we are completely blind. We still have to be responsible for that. But knowing that, I can find them innocent and at the same time stop them from doing what they're doing and avoid them. And because, I say this all the time, I don't swim with sharks. I don't expect them to become vegans on my behalf. I allow them their nature, and I accommodate them, right? And maybe someday the shark will lay down with the lamb, like as they say in the Bible, right? But in the meantime, I give them their distance. The same as politicians, the same as people who are not awake. Right? I understand that, and from the position of being awake, I can assess this intelligently and compassionately, and that's forgiveness. That's the forgiveness that's wise. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. Right? And in that, he imputed no guilt to them. So there was no crime. I mean, that meant the purification of all sin. It's a beautiful story. It may never have happened, but it's still a beautiful story. So start with just giving yourself permission to be angry, and also giving yourself permission to feel the guilt. And be with both of those. Notice how you're trying to fight with them. You're trying to get rid of the guilt, right? And there's this habit of wanting to get rid of the anger, and you can watch this whole thing happen, and watch it as if it was a programmable robot, right? That had just gotten programmed, it got stuck in a loop, right? And it's just kind of going round and around and around and around. And just kind of step back and go, oh, okay. There's just, well, I'm not going to take sides with either one of these. Right? Anger has arisen. Okay, anger's arisen. Right? And then there's this feeling that's also arisen, like conditioning, that I shouldn't feel angry. But you know what? I actually do feel anger. And I know I'm not supposed to, but I do. Okay. All right. Well, now what? Now notice what I'm doing is I'm letting them both be there. Which means I'm taking away at least some of the conflict between it. Right? And then there's the feeling of guilt to try to enforce the fact that I'm not supposed to feel it. Okay, so there's this here too. Now, try to put them all into just feelings, literal sensations in the body, and keep them there. And then notice how the mind wants to make the story of it. And even as you're beginning to become free of it, the mind is going to want to say, oh man, you've been so indoctrinated into this. It's going to be really hard to get rid of. Well, no, it's not. That's more of the same, trying to keep the mechanism in place. And say, well, this could be surprisingly easy. Oh, okay, maybe it's easy. But then become really curious and like a scientist studying something. Really watch all the way the different piece parts function. And the more you do that, the more distance you have. The more distance you have, the more compassion you have. The more compassion you have, the more genuine forgiveness happens. Forgiveness, I wish it shouldn't be a verb. You can't do it. It just happens. It's a state you arrive at. It is not something you can do. Nobody can do it. It will be a completely affected. It will be pretense. Right? You'll want to appear to be forgiving, and inside you're seething. So all of those feelings, right? Because you can see the conflict. One side of you knows I need to set reasonable boundaries. Right? I need to. This is part of life. This person cannot be trusted, so I cannot put myself in a relationship trusting them. It's the way it has to be. And then something else, I say, oh, you can't set boundaries. That's not okay. And of course, in Christianity, boundaries are completely verboten, right? Because God ignores them, right? God knows what you're thinking, for Christ's sake. Gee, my God. So does the devil. So I guess the devil's kind of a god too. Yeah, they've made the devil a god. Anyway, I'm digressing. So take all of those things and take a step back. And also take the burden off yourself that somehow you've got to get rid of all of those in order to be free of them, right? To be free of the whole indoctrination thing. This is another way it works. Okay, so I got to be free of the guilt, allow myself anger. So you're trying to force behaviors. You don't have to. You step into this place where you simply are completely equanimous and you let them all be there, right? The energy that's holding the conflict in place will be gone because that energy is your identification with it. Without you identifying with it, It has no energy of its own. And so it will eventually begin to calm down, and the natural flow of the Tao will begin to happen. And you won't have to do a damn thing, because you'll simply be witnessing your true nature at work. Your only job is to keep moving yourself back to the place of the true nature, to where God really is, where Christ really is, right? Not the one that that has been taught about, but the one who's actually witnessing all of the feelings. The you that is witnessing the guilt, the anger, the indoctrination, the resistance, the mental activity. That is God. That's the real I am. Does that help, David? Susan, hi to all from New York. Hi, Susan. I have come to detest hope, as it seems to disappoint. I shall not want leads me to empty, numb apathy. How do I stop arguing with how life is? Peace seems elusive. Hope is an interesting thing. Give up hope. Forget hope. Because what is it? It's the future. You know, I don't want anything in the future. I want it now. Thank you very much. In the present moment, there's no need for hope. So you can throw it out. I hope things are going to get better. Because all that's doing is reinforcing the sense that things are bad now. Right? And notice the argument with how life is. Let's take this apart. Let's deconstruct this a bit. Take a sip of water. I put my feet up on the desk, like an important CEO or something. The arguing with what life is. Okay, take a step back and let's look at what's actually happening. An event takes place. Run the whole thing in slow motion, right? An event takes place, and you are aware of that event. And then there's a reaction to that event, right? I like it, I don't like it. Right? Let's take something I think is probably more germane to this, and that is, I have a desire for something, right? But every attempt I make to achieve that desire gets thwarted, right? And there's a reaction to that. So then let's look at that reaction. Event, reaction. Right? This is the way all life works. Now, what is it that makes this particular reaction happen with this particular event? Like, I don't like this. I want this to go away. Right? Is there anything hardwired there? Now, it does happen so fast that it appears to be, this is the way it is. Right? But is it? It's actually a programmed response, and it responds that way to this particular event based on experiences we had mostly as children. Right? We learned to react to certain things in certain ways, which means this is not a hardwired connection, which means it can be broken. It can actually be severed, and a completely different set of reactions put in place. And or better, no programmed reactions put into place, but instead the natural response of life happens instead, the Tao. Now, notice that the arguing that you're talking about is a mental activity that is part of that reaction. Now, are you not witnessing all of that happening? Also, the response, you put in a response, it's kind of, the spiritual idea then, well, I'm just going to let go of all my desires. As if you could. If you tried that and failed, good, it doesn't work. You don't have to, because yes, it just leaves you empty and numb, because desire is part of the juice of life. Right? What we have to learn to deal with is what happens when our desires are not fulfilled. How do we remain equanimous and happy? How do we make our happiness less dependent upon the desires and more dependent upon, so dependent on ourselves that while a desire being fulfilled or not being fulfilled will create certain feelings. Yeah, obviously there'll be disappointment, right? Or there'll be a sense of elation if I get it. But there won't be the same kind of dependency that makes me want to cling to it or feel horrible, feel unhappy when it doesn't happen. Because oftentimes we don't really have control over it. There's only so much we can do. Right? Sometimes we have a desire for something that is beyond what anything the world can fulfill. That just the desire for that kind of perfect spiritual freedom, that we don't even know where to find it, right? So the peace comes when you step back and recognize that all of this stuff that's happening is conditioning and not you. At that point, it doesn't even have to stop for you to feel at peace about it. The thinking is somehow I've got to either get what I want or I got to stop wanting in order to be at peace. Right? And that puts you in a fight with yourself to either, take the massive action route success, do the success thing and all that, or visualize till the veins pop out of your neck, or be really spiritual and own yourself to death. So you don't want anything. I'm beyond all desire, right? And both of those are completely ineffective. Both of those are part of the problem. Both of those are engaged, and both of those are functioning on the basis of the egoic mind. They're me trying to make something happen one way or another. Take a step back. That activity doesn't have to stop for you to be at peace. That's what we think. I have to attain this state of desirelessness, or I have to get what I want in order for this feeling to dissipate, this feeling of lacking something to dissipate. So that's step one. Oh, this doesn't have to change. This doesn't have to be different in order for me to know peace. Okay. So I'm just going to step back here into this place from which I am watching the event, the triggered reaction, the mental activity around it, the spiritual conditioning to try to find that way to deal with it. And yet I'm sitting back here watching it. It's going on out here. A lot of activity, a lot of turmoil. But here, it's actually peaceful here. Because there's no activity. It's simply watching. If you seek peace in trying to make certain conditions happen, you won't find it because it's not there. You may have conditions to your liking for a moment, and there may be a sense of peace. Usually what happens is immediately the next desire arises. There's not even a moment where we get to just kind of taste the deliciousness of that peace. The next desire is already queued up, ready to go. This is also part of the nature of life, right? So that process is never going to stop, which means I will never find peace in the conditioned world. I will never find peace in conditions. I have to find it in the one place that isn't conditioned, that isn't conditional, that doesn't depend on someplace else. And that is the only place I know of is my being. And now as the sense of I starts identifying with that sense of being rather than the activity, two amazing things happen. First off, peace emerges. There's a sense of wholeness. And then secondarily, this starts changing. This starts becoming more harmonious. because it's not under the thumb of the egoic mind anymore. Which creates conflict, which pushes this away, grabs this. I want this, I don't want that, I hate this, I love this, right? All of that conflict going on. Because the ego isn't in charge anymore. You are. That peace begins to kind of permeate the whole energy system and the world. And then it becomes a desire arises and you're fine with it. Right? Boy, that would be great to have. That would be a great experience. And you just let it be there. And you let it mature. And you go, oh, it wasn't really for that. It was actually for that. It matures. It gets purified. And then finally, it may fulfill itself. And if it does, wow, it's really enjoyable. But you know full well it's not going to last. Right? That there'll be another desire behind it. That new car will get old. Right? Right? It's just the way it works. And for some reason, it doesn't happen. Your sense of contentment isn't touched. It's like there'll be a feeling of disappointment, and it'll come and it'll go because you're not holding on to it. There's no urgency in it anymore. Right? Now you're just watching the flow of life, which is the flow of desire, which can either just fade away or fulfill itself. And this is just the cycle of life. And you can see hope has nothing to do with that. Hope is really an egoic thing. Someday I'll figure out how to get what I want. I mean, that's really where it comes to. So you don't need it. So come back to that simple presence, the simple fact of your own being. That is peace, and it's nowhere else. And from here, it does not need anything in your life to be any different than it is to be because it's always there. It's always there. When something, I pick up this glass and I move it over here. Did the space here have to make way for the glass? And when I move the glass, the space come back in? Right? No, it's in the space. Peace is the space, and all the activity is happening in it. When the activity quiets down, we notice the peace. Or if our attention moves away from the activity towards that, you notice the peace. But it's never absent. It doesn't come and go. The activity doesn't push it aside, and then when it disappears, the peace comes back. This is what we try to do we're trying to get the peace to come back. It's right here, right now. We become aware of it. Okay? So that when this all calms down, it doesn't mean peace has come back. It means that the noise is quieted down and I'm seeing it now. It's like, walk through a shopping mall and you'll hear that there's music playing, but you can't tell what it is. There's so much ambient noise going on. You might make out, you can't make it out, right? Because it's in the middle of all this noise. But if all of that went silent, you'd hear absolutely clearly what that was, right? And so in the silence, everything becomes distinct. In peace, everything becomes distinct. Peace is the self. It is another word for you. So it is elusive to the mind. But since it is what you are, it cannot be elusive to you. It's just that the belief has had you looking for it out there, and it's not there. It's here. That sense of being right now. Just notice that sense of your own existence, and it's really quiet. And it doesn't vibrate. It's just there. That's peace. Does that help, Susan? Thank you. Good evening from sweltering Sweden. Getting ready for silent retreat next week. Silence is the way and the goal. Yeah. Be the silence. Be that silence. Take it in. Use a silent retreat as the opportunity to be the silence. And it's just like peace. Like I said, the silence is always there. The sound it appears in the silence. It doesn't, the silence doesn't go away and then come back when the sound goes. They're not displacing like space. So be that silence, and notice how your mind is going to want to make you into a person being silent for some goal, enlightenment. The ultimate goal, right? The mind will want to take that and make you somebody being silent in order to get enlightenment. But instead, be the silence itself and watch the activity of the events of the retreat, the other meditators, and of course watching your sensations and the mind. But be the silence watching it. That's enlightenment. Thanks, Merck. Can't wait to hear how it was for you. Anja, internet was invented for satsang worldwide. I totally agree. Yes. Igle, hello GP. I have a question about SMT Smith and not even sure how to articulate. I'm in a relationship 5 years now, and I constantly doubt if I should stay or go. It's torturous. I just would like to make a decision and move on. Thank you. If there's anything you could say about it. Yes, I can. This is really wow. I can see I can actually see your mind. Right. So here's what I want you to do. And EFT is very helpful in this because it helps calm down the nervous system. And as you said, you're feeling tortured about it. What I want you to do is I want you to simply give yourself permission to not know. Right? What is the best thing for me to do? And then just sit with both sides of it. Right? Just try to get yourself to a place in the middle and just go, okay, I leave. I'm leaving. And just feel what that feels like to leave. The other side, because you've gotten now kind of habituated into an argument, right? But instead, see yourself as like a negotiator, right? You're a master mediator, and there are two people. It's a contract dispute between you and you, and you're not taking sides. It's not that that the mediator happens to be the other guy's lawyer, right? They're completely neutral, right? Because you can do that because you just want what's the best thing. You want what's the best for you and for her or him, whatever it might be. You want what's the best for you and your partner. And of course, what else would you want? If being in the relationship isn't the best for both of you, of course you don't want it. Even if it hurts them, right? If it's the best, well, we've all been hurt, right? It's just part of the way it goes. So that helps kind of set aside the doubt, because the doubt's okay. You don't know, right? But there's this feeling that I have to decide. Right? Now notice that. Right? Okay. There's a feeling I have to decide. Right? There's a sense of urgency. It shouldn't drag on, right? Yeah, okay. Let that be there. All that means is that you're going to really give it your whole heart in simply being present with both. And say, okay, I'm going to give you both equal time, but right now, I'm just going to be present with leaving. Right? Staying, you'll have your say. But for right now, like any good negotiator, gets to speak uninterrupted. And then just be present with being with leaving. Okay, what happens if I leave? Oh, they're going to be really sad. They're going to be upset. I mean, my family's going to say, what are my friends going to think? I'm crazy. This is the best thing that ever happened to me. You know the litany that's going to come up. Will I be alone? Will I find somebody else? Right? And just be with all of that. Right? Usually what happens first is all the negative stuff comes up. But if you stay with it long enough, say, yeah, but I'm not really completely happy here. If I was, obviously, I wouldn't be having this discussion. So I can't deny that. And I really want to be really happy. And if I'm not really happy, then I'm not really going to be able to make them happy. I'm not going to be fully here. So there's that too. And what would it be like if I was with somebody that I was totally there. I was totally present. There was, I wasn't holding anything back. Right? I was in with both of you. And then just let yourself feel through that. And then if you give that some time, then go back to this, say, well, what about staying? Well, staying it would be easier. Right? It's comfortable for me. Um, could I become fully in? Well, what happens if I don't become fully in? And then you start being fully present with with what that means and everything about it. And I think if you do that, honestly, staying neutral, right? Though when you first start to do it, the fight will be there. Or you got to decide now. You got to decide now. I say, well, I'm not. I can't decide now. So I accept that too, and I'm just going to be with that, and I'm just going to go back and forth here. Give her each side a say, and I'm just going to feel into it. And in fact, even as I've been doing this, I can actually feel a shift in you. I was home. I felt very close to blurting out the answer, but I'm not going to do that. I want you to discover it for yourself. But so do that. Notice how gentle it is. It's not making anybody wrong. It's not there, not right or not wrong. It's just you're really just trying to get to your heart, to the heart of the heart, because the heart is also the truth. So the truth is benevolent and compassion. And whatever decision you make will be the right one, and it will be the best one for all concerned, even if it doesn't necessarily feel that way on the surface. So, does that help you, Egle? I'm not even going to try to pronounce your last name. Peter, yes, wonderful satsang. Nothing really exists. Everything just appears to exist, but the character goes on with its job. Thank you, GP. Much love. You're very welcome. Neutrality. I may have to replay it a few times. Thank you very much. You're welcome. It's an excellent question, and it only feels arcane and difficult because the mind needs objects, right? And you're not an object. So self-knowledge and this understanding of nothing and everything, all and nothing, right, is beyond what the mind can conceive of. It can't be conceptualized. So it becomes a living, felt truth, right? Because you are it, right? And can you know yourself? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Can you know yourself? The answer is no, you can't. The perceiver cannot perceive itself. A knife can't cut itself. A finger can't touch itself. The eye can't see itself. You cannot. You know yourself simply in your being. Being and knowing are one. Enjoy the replays. Hello, Wouter. Good to see you. Thank you, GP. Just wondering if there's a way of knowing if I am still operating from conditioning or consciousness, or is it a moment by moment thing? It's a moment by moment thing. Yeah, it is. The willingness to know, in this process, the mind appears to be quite crafty, right? Quite a shapeshifter, right? But you begin to be able to feel the difference. And again, I point out the story of the wheat and the tares that Jesus told. It was addressing exactly this. The guy had the wheat field, right, which is very important, right, at that time. Storable food, what a wonder. That In the night, enemies of this guy went in and planted tares, which are just this really noxious weed. And the workers in the field came and, look, we found tares. They started to grow, and we found some tares in there. Should we pull them up? I said, well, no, don't, because you'll also pull up the wheat. You have to let them grow to the harvest, and at the harvest we'll be able to see the difference. We'll be able to make the separation. And the interesting thing about tares is when they're growing, they look a lot like the wheat. But as they mature, the wheat turns that golden brown, and the tares turn this dark, ugly black thing, and it becomes really obvious which is which. And so you have to be. It is the ego that's in a hurry to be free of the ego. Isn't that funny? The ego's in a hurry to get enlightenment because it thinks it's a gift for it. I think Atmananda once said, enlightenment's wonderful. Too bad you're not there to enjoy it. So the ego is, let's get on with this. Come on, we're going to tell. That's consciousness, that's conditioning, and it wants its checklist, right? So, but the true seeker sees through that and is just willing to be present in this moment and let the wisdom of this moment show itself. And at that point, enlightenment is no longer an end goal. Enlightenment is what you're living in this moment. Oh, everybody's blessings for Crispin. Wonderful. Hey, Francis King. If we're not entities, but rather the activity of infinite consciousness, how are we able to interact with one another? Are we just puppets on a string? No, because a puppet would have to be some kind of an entity. There's no string, there's no puppet. It is consciousness pondering itself. Right? And when you say we are not entities, but rather the activity of infinite, the question itself is making the we an entity, isn't it? Because if it's not an entity, then the only entity there is consciousness, which means the consciousness that you are right now hearing my voice is that consciousness. And so I am you. Right? You are listening to yourself. It is just like there's no entity in your dream at night. This is why we were given dreams. They are a hint. They are a breadcrumb to follow back to reality. In a dream, it appears as though you're talking to somebody, even a friend, and you may even hear their voice, but they're not there. There's nobody there. There is no entity. It is all me. Right? The place we always get tripped up is that we still personalize consciousness. So when we say we're not entities, rather infinite consciousness, there's this very unspoken sense of consciousness being personal. And that it's something other than myself. In your dream, it's all you. Although in the dream itself, it feels as if you are actually having conversations with others and interacting with them. Even physical sensations. There's nobody there. You are interacting with yourself. And in the dream, you can have a different body, a different name, speak a different language, right? And nothing in the dream tells you that you're not the person in the dream. And that person in the dream does not realize they're not an entity. There's nothing in the dream that contributes to that. The awakening from the dream does not happen in the dream. It's something that asserts itself from outside the dream. The entity that's actually dreaming is not Francis King. It is not GP Walsh. It is not Carl Egley. Anybody. Consciousness is not personal. The whole practice, if I can call it that, is freeing the sense of I from the sense of it being a person, being localized, being bounded or defined in any way. And the best way to do that is bringing attention to the sense I am and exploring it, examining it, finding that there's no boundaries to it. It's not made of anything. It has no beginning or end. anything that appears in it, to it. Like a dream at night, it appears in it and to it, and is made of it. Right? It is made of mind. There's no other substance there. And so dropping the idea of entity as a thing at all. So there aren't just puppets on a string. There are no puppets and there is no string. It is simply infinite consciousness pondering itself. Because there's nothing else to ponder. And that ponder is the dream of life and the universe. That pondering is Vishnu, dreaming the universe, asleep on the ocean of infinite being. Does that help? Anybody? Does anybody help by what I'm saying? But channeling the anger. Anger is when you suppress the anger is when you have a problem. Anger is simply, if you can, if there's something you can do about some kind of moral offense, or you see something happening and there's something you can do about it, do it. That's channeling the anger. Right? If there's nothing you can do about it, well, then you have to process it differently. You have to recognize this feeling is there, and that anger wants to do something, but it can't. But you're going to allow it to be there, and you're going to create the inner space. And that allows it to diffuse itself. Otherwise, it becomes a trauma. It gets suppressed. So in consciousness, you can allow anger to be there. It doesn't have to act, and it won't have any side effect. But if you can act, what it is, it's an impulse to act when it seems like you need to act. That's all it is. That's all fear and anger are. Anger directs it at something, and fear simply directs it away. One goes one way, the other goes the other. So that's what I mean by like Gandhi channeling his anger towards. He had an objective. His anger was his country was being occupied by somebody. They didn't belong there. They came in, they raped the women, they stole all their goods. They robbed and plundered like every empire does. And he wasn't going to have it. And through his non-violent means, that what we call anger, we always think I'm just really pissed off or something. Like for him, it was resolution, right? It was a direction. It was a mission of his life to free India from the British. And he did it. So, finally caught you live. Oh, wonderful. Glad to have you, Alexandra. So happy for this. Me too. Interesting. In German, sin equals mind. Sense. Very interesting. Regarding the second part of my question, if I was to only live in water and experience water, life forms there, animals, plants, how would I also be the land if I can't observe it? Because what you observe is only what's appearing, not what is. Remember, what is the potential for everything. That is the nature of consciousness. We mistake consciousness for the content of consciousness, which is simply whatever happens to be in the focus of attention. That is simply what is appearing in consciousness. Consciousness is the vast underpinning ocean that gives rise to it and appears in it. Right? But it appears in consciousness to consciousness and is made of consciousness, right? So simply because I'm not aware of it, in a sense, it doesn't actually exist. It is outside of it. But don't try to make too big a deal out of that, right? Because this is one of the ways in which non-dual inquiry can become kind of theoretical and philosophical. Instead, get to the heart. The heart of it is self-realization, right? And in self-realization, you understand the nature of consciousness. Therefore, you understand what all this is. Yet if I start explaining it to you, your mind is just going to start making up concepts about it, right? So what I do instead is turn your attention towards what you actually do know, right? What's always there, but you have not paid attention to, and that is the sense of your being, right? It has not been given enough time to become, so that for you to absorb yourself into it, so it can become more than just this emptiness that we seem to be aware of, right? It can become Vishnu asleep on the infinite ocean. And I'm speeding up here because I've hit 2 hours, and there's still a bit of a list here. But Alexandra, how does one integrate ego's needs of control, predictability with one's intuition? I find myself alternating between states of increased awareness and increased ego. Very good, actually. First, I want to give you the good news, right? The good news is that the only reason you can see yourself vacillating between awareness and ego is that the awakening has begun. Because if it hadn't, you would not be aware of awareness. You would just be the ego. You wouldn't be in Satsang, for sure. You wouldn't be questioning any of this. You wouldn't be talking about the ego's needs, because you wouldn't be sitting here looking at them. You would just be that, and you wouldn't be regarding them. You wouldn't even be questioning control and predictability. It would just be an assumption. So first off, understand where you are now looking at this from, right? So you're already awake. So, as I said, very good news, right? So really take that in first off, because we get a lot of people have this idea that the awakening is like one and done, right? And that once that happens, the ego is never gonna flare up ever again. Not true. Obviously not true. And what that does is make us doubt the experiences we've had. They doubt the position we are quite literally sitting in and looking at. So first off, recognize it's already happened. But the habitual activity, the ego is habitual activity. It is a word that is an abstraction of functioning, right? It's not a thing. The ego doesn't need control and predictability. The need for control and predictability is inherent in the nervous system, and we've personalized it, and that's what we call an ego. So we think there's this entity, the ego, that has this control and predictability. Take that out of the equation, because it's not real. And now what is this feeling of control and predictability that is running through the system? Without giving it the judgment, oh, it's the ego's need, we look close, we find, oh no, it isn't the ego's need, it's the need of life. To control things, the predictability, it's just tools it uses to stay safe. That's all it is. So now it's simply kind of, it's a natural thing that's happened, and it happens in a particular way. Sometimes there's a lot of emphasis on control and predictability because I don't want anything to change, right? Because of childhood experiences that just kind of programmed the system to function that way. Now, taking ego out of it, like, it's not a problem anymore. It's simply the way your rescue dog. I sometimes refer to the nervous system. It's like a rescue dog. It's been programmed to behave in a certain way. It hasn't been programmed with love and acceptance and affection. Right? It's been with cruelty and neglect and all sorts of other things. So you get a rescue dog in, you go to scratch your foot, and it cowers because it's so used to being hit. So it takes a long time, but after a while, it begins now to respond to the new environment. The defensive behavior falls away, and it now relates to this environment as being accepted and loved, and takes its place, right? Your nervous system is that, right? All of ours are. It is simply the animal nature of the human body. So now you realize that your particular nervous system got trained, conditioned to respond to circumstances by trying to grab for control and favoring predictability over taking risks or opportunities. right? Now you are in a much more aware position, realizing it's interfering with the other side of you, which is awakening and growing, which is the desire for freedom, right? The desire to get some better opportunities, which involves some risks, going places I've never gone before, which means I'm not going to have the same level of control. Now, notice that there's this habit pattern going on. You don't even have to call it an ego, it's just functioning in the nervous system. That and it got that way because it worked for some point in your life. It worked, right? So, oh, this works, good. We're going to keep doing it. But it doesn't work anymore because there's something deeper in you. Right? Something wants to wake up more. It wants more life, more juice, more fun, more intimacy, whatever, right? So now you got to sit in the place of the awakeness, because what happens if I start clinging to the juice, I start making this. I want to get rid of this control, this predictability, which is what you say, the ego's need, right? Now it becomes a pejorative, right? Well, it's not a problem, right? It's just these guys are in conflict with one another. I've got this desire here, and I didn't create that either, by the way. It's not personal. There's this desire that has appeared, this reaching for something, whatever it might be. In general, I just say it's a desire for freedom, for more freedom. That feels like a threat to this because that means losing some control. So, in order for this to come to any kind of reconciliation, I've got to not take sides. I've got to step back. Drop the pejoratives. The ego is an idea that has been projected on this. This is something that's actually happening. The ego is not. It's an idea. It's a concept. So it's irrelevant, right? I just refer to it as conditioning. It's a conditioned pattern. It's a habit, nothing more. Okay, good. Now, I want this freedom. I really want this freedom. And you can even picture it in your mind what it would be like. Maybe whatever, even if it's enlightenment or full awakening, whatever it might be. Or nothing more kind. I want more money or a better relationship or something like that. And then allow that feeling of resistance to be there. Right? Again, don't take sides. Step back and just say, I want this and I need this. I wouldn't want to get this if it had ended up killing me. It would be a moot point. So I really want this freedom. Is it possible for this freedom to be attained safely? Notice this is a completely different inner dialogue, isn't it? And all of a sudden, the safety mechanism is going, oh, well, at first it might just go, no, no, and digging its heels. But if you just say, yeah, but this isn't going away, right? So I really need you to at least open up and consider this. It will, because it's quite malleable, right? Because with you no longer seeing it as a problem and trying to push it away, it's already feeling less threatened. It doesn't have to defend itself as strongly. We all do that. If somebody's trying to push their opinion on you, even if they're right, you don't want to admit it. You go, no, you just dig in your heels. You just don't want to. But if you say, you're right, you're absolutely right. I need you. I need what you have, but I also need this. So what can we do here? And this will begin to happen. I guarantee it. It happens every single time. Sometimes it's so fast, you can't believe it. Right? So as long as you see the ego's needs as a problem, you can't integrate them. Notice what I just did is exactly what you asked. I integrated them. Right? By giving you the freedom to simply want what you want when you want it, because that's just natural too, and recognize the need of the human mechanism to be safe. When you acknowledge both of those and just sit, what happens? The Tao takes over. The natural flow of energy takes over. Because when the ego, as a belief in an entity, is here, conflict is there. When the ego is gone, the conflict is gone, and these guys begin to dance the way they naturally do, like everything in nature does. And that's how you know. That's That's how the self redeems human experience. And I will leave it at that. But I'm over time, but I really wanted to answer that question, especially this. It's the first time you were here. You got to be here live. So, thank you, GP. Hello, Susanna. Such a great satsang. Beautiful answer. Your words made me see I've been trying too hard to chase a peace that already is. Yeah. You can't chase silence. You can't chase stillness, can you? You have to be still. Be still and know that I am. Thank you, Jennifer. David, profound thanks. Oh, you guys so welcome. What's the difference between no self and the self? Requires a long answer. The short answer is this. Two different ways of simply bringing somebody to see that which is beyond all words. So sometimes I refer to self, sometimes I refer to no self. And it depends. Somebody who's really kind of wrapped up in the self and, the materialism, no self. I mean, this glass has no self, right? You can't find anything there. It's a temporary aggregation of particles. So there's no self there, right? And yet, when I just kind of ponder my own existence, I am. There's something here, but it's just not a thing. And so self and no self are just two different ways of expressing the same completely ineffable thing to express. And the purest expression of it is simply, I am that. Thank you, Emmanuel. I could go on about that one, but yeah, it's getting late. Thank you. I will do that. Said Ego, although I wish you would have blurbed the answer. Something. Okay. So, oops, sorry. Sometimes click on these things and push things up I don't need to. Universe is looking at itself through us. Yes. Or you are looking at yourself, and what you see is the universe. That's actually more accurate. You're the one looking. It is always consciousness that is the awareness. And what it sees is itself made manifest. It looks at itself and sees the universe. You look at yourself and see the universe. I always want to bring it home to personal realization. Carl, thank you, GP, your infinite sharing and wisdom. You're very welcome. Thank you. Jennifer, insightful, says Alexandra, very good. Oh, you're very welcome. And welcome if you get to be with us live. Every satsang for me is a great celebration. Great. Thank you, Ava. Good. I got through all the questions. Wonderful. Thank you all. I'm now going to go hang out with my son for a bit. But I will see you all very soon. And I do have some brand new things coming up, some new programs coming up that are going to be pretty good, I think. Yeah, several of them. We've been working on it for a while. So anyway, good to see you all. Thanks for being here.